Some people disappear and are never found. Some vanish without a trace, and the world moves on, helpless. But every once in a while, someone is taken, swallowed whole by darkness, and somehow, against every odd, they find a way to survive. This is one of those stories. And this is not just a story about a crime. This is a story about the human will to endure, about the terrifying power one person can have over another, and about how an ordinary Tuesday morning in a quiet California neighborhood changed the life of one family forever. This is the story of Jaycee Dugard, a girl who was 11 years old when she was stolen from the world. A girl who spent 18 years in captivity, hidden in a backyard compound behind fences and tarps, and the silence of a neighborhood that never looked closely enough. 18 years. Think about that for just one moment. 18 years of birthdays she did not celebrate with her family. 18 years of Christmases, of summers, of ordinary days that passed without her mother ever knowing if she was alive or dead. And what makes this story so deeply disturbing is not just the horror of what happened to her inside that compound, it is the fact that this could have ended so differently. Law enforcement visited that property. Neighbors noticed things that felt wrong. And yet, for nearly 2 decades, not a single person connected the dots. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear is going to change the way you look at the world around you. It was June 10th, 1991, a Tuesday morning in South Lake Tahoe, California. The air was cool and clear the way it gets in the mountains before the heat of the day settles in. Jaycee Dugard was 11 years old. She had long blonde hair that caught the light, and a smile that her mother, Terry Probin, described as the kind that could fill up an entire room. That morning was ordinary in every way that matters. Jaycee woke up, got dressed, and prepared for a school day like any other. She kissed her mother goodbye and walked out the front door toward her bus stop. It was a short walk, a familiar route, the kind of neighborhood where kids were supposed to be safe, where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Terry stood at the window and watched her daughter walk away. She had no idea that was the last time she would see her child for 18 long, agonizing years. Within minutes of Jaycee reaching the end of the street, a gray car slowed down nearby. A woman in the passenger seat made brief eye contact with the girl. Then, without any warning at all, a man threw open the car door, jumped out, and grabbed Jaycee. He had a stun gun. She screamed. Her stepfather, Carl Probin, heard something from a distance. He was on his bicycle nearby and saw the gray car. He pedaled as hard as he could, trying to chase it down the street, but the car was already accelerating away. It turned a corner, and Jaycee Dugard disappeared from the world. Police were called immediately. The investigation began within hours. Carl Probin gave his account of what he had seen. A composite sketch of the gray car was released. Authorities began searching the area, and Terry Probin began the kind of waiting that no parent should ever have to endure. The days turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. The months turned into years. And still, nothing. No confirmed sightings. No solid leads. No Jaycee. What no one knew at the time, not law enforcement, not the community, not Terry Probin watching her front door every single day, was that Jaycee had been taken to a property in Antioch, California, a city nearly 3 hours south of South Lake Tahoe, and in a backyard that most of the neighborhood never thought to question. A man named Phillip Garrido was already building the prison where Jaycee would spend the next 18 years of her life. Phillip Garrido was not a stranger to the justice system. He was a registered sex offender. In the 1970s, he had kidnapped a woman, drugged her, and held her in a storage unit where he sexually assaulted her for days. He was convicted, sentenced to prison, and then, through a series of decisions that the state of California would later have to answer for publicly, he was released far earlier than his sentence required. He went home. He married a woman named Nancy Garrido, and he went back to doing what he had always done: watching, selecting, and planning. By the time Jaycee walked to her bus stop that June morning, Garrido had already been watching her. He had selected her deliberately, and he had a place prepared for her, a hidden world built specifically to trap and control another human being. The Garrido property in Antioch looked unremarkable from the street, a standard house in a quiet residential neighborhood, but behind the main structure, hidden behind tall wooden fences, thick tarps, and deliberately overgrown trees and shrubs, was something no one passing by would ever have guessed existed. There were sheds, makeshift structures, tents, a network of connected spaces that formed a compound, invisible from the outside, completely cut off from the world. That is where Jaycee arrived on the day she was taken. That is where she would live for nearly 2 decades. And from the very first day, Phillip Garrido began the systematic process of breaking her down. He told her that her family did not love her, that they were not looking for her, that the world outside was dangerous, and that she needed him to survive. He gave her a new name. He called her Alyssa, trying to erase Jaycee Dugard completely. And for a terrified, traumatized 11-year-old girl who had just been torn from everything she knew, every person she loved, and every sense of safety she had ever felt, the weight of that was almost impossible to carry. What Phillip Garrido was doing to Jaycee has a name in psychology. It is called coercive control. It is a pattern of behavior used by abusers to dominate another person completely, not just through physical force, but through manipulation, isolation, fear, and the slow erosion of a person's sense of self. Garrido controlled what Jaycee ate. He controlled when she slept. He controlled what information she received about the outside world. He rewarded compliance and punished any sign of resistance. And over time, the human brain, which is built above all else to survive, begins to adapt. Experts call this learned helplessness. When a person is subjected repeatedly to inescapable pain and control, they eventually stop fighting, not because they are weak, but because the mind has concluded that resistance is futile, and that cooperation is the only path to survival. Jaycee did not stop fighting because she gave up. Jaycee survived because she was smarter than her captor ever gave her credit for. She found her own forms of resistance. She found her own internal world where he could not reach her. One of the most important lifelines Jaycee had during those years was writing. Garrido gave her books and paper, perhaps thinking it would keep her occupied and docile. What it actually did was give her a private space where Jaycee Dugard still existed. Even when the world around her called her by another name, she wrote journals. She recorded her thoughts, her fears, her memories of her mother, of the neighborhood, of the morning everything changed. Those pages became a sanctuary, a place where she could be herself in the only way that was available to her, and she held on to them fiercely. The years kept passing. The world outside the compound changed constantly. New technologies emerged. Political events unfolded. Children who had been born around the same time as Jaycee graduated from high school, went to college, got jobs, fell in love. Meanwhile, inside those fences, time moved differently. It felt both endless and compressed at once. Jaycee grew from a child into a teenager, and then into a young woman, without any of the normal markers of growing up. No school friends, no sleepovers, no first days of high school, no prom, no driver's license, no college application. Just the compound, just the fences, just Garrido's rules and Nancy Garrido's watchful presence, and the sounds of a neighborhood that was so close and yet might as well have been on another planet. And then, something happened that changed the entire landscape of Jaycee's captivity. She gave birth. She was 14 years old when her first daughter came into the world. There was no hospital, no doctor, no midwife, no one to hold her hand through the fear and pain of labor, except the people who had put her in that situation in the first place. A few years later, she gave birth again, a second daughter. Both children were fathered by Phillip Garrido. The details of this are among the most disturbing elements of a case that has no shortage of disturbing elements. But here's what you need to understand about those children and what they meant to Jaycee. They saved her, not from the compound, not from Garrido, but from the slow internal destruction that might have consumed her otherwise. Those little girls became the reason Jaycee got up every morning. They became the center of gravity that kept her anchored to herself. Inside a situation she had no power over, raising those children was something she could do, something she could pour her love into, something Garrido could not take from her. She became their mother in every real and meaningful sense of the word. Without any formal education herself at that point, she taught her daughters to read. She taught them to count, to write, to think, to ask questions. She made the compound feel as safe as she possibly could for two little girls who had no idea how different their lives were from the lives of other children. She told them stories. She found animals for them to care for, including cats that wandered onto the property, and she let her daughters help nurture them. In giving her children the warmth and the structure and the love that she herself had been robbed of, Jaycee discovered something about herself that Phillip Garrido never anticipated. He thought he was creating a prisoner. He was forging a mother. And mothers, as it turns out, are among the most resilient and determined human beings on earth. Now, here's the part of the story that will make your stomach drop. Because Jaycee Dugard was not completely invisible to the outside world during those 18 years. There were moments, several of them, moments where the truth was almost within reach. Neighbors near the Garrido property had reported strange activity over the years. Unusual sounds, children seen in the backyard who did not appear to go to school or leave the property regularly. One neighbor called authorities at some point, and in 2006, because Garrido was a registered sex offender, a parole check was conducted. A parole officer came to the house. He walked through parts of the property. He spoke with Garrido, and then he left. He never entered the hidden backyard area. He never saw the compound. He never found Jaycee, and Jaycee, trained by years of psychological conditioning to remain invisible, to never draw attention, to never give Garrido a reason to punish her, stayed silent and stayed hidden. Each of those near misses was like a door swinging open just wide enough to let in a sliver of light and then slamming shut again. And each time, Jaycee had to find the will to keep going, to keep breathing, to keep being the mother her daughters needed her to be. Then came August 24th, 2009. Phillip Garrido had grown increasingly erratic over the years. He had launched a small printing business. He had developed an intense and disturbing religious obsession, becoming convinced that he had divine powers and a special mission to deliver a message to the world. On that August morning, he decided to visit the University of California, Berkeley campus to hand out religious pamphlets. And he brought people with him. He brought Nancy, he brought Jaycee, and he brought both of their daughters. Think about what that means. After 18 years of near total isolation, Jaycee Dugard was standing on a university campus, surrounded by hundreds of people, surrounded by potential witnesses and helpers, and she said nothing. She did not run. She did not approach a stranger. She did not scream, because by that point, after 18 years of systematic control and conditioning, the outside world did not feel safe to her. Freedom felt more terrifying than captivity. That is not weakness. That is what prolonged abuse does to the human mind. It rewrites the definition of safe. But this time, fate was paying attention. Two campus law enforcement officers, Lisa Campbell and Ally Jacobs, noticed Garrido that day. Something about the group made them uncomfortable. The way the girls moved, the dynamic between Garrido and the women with him. Something felt wrong in a way that was hard to articulate but impossible to ignore. The officers asked Garrido for his identification and told him he needed to report to the campus police office the following morning. That night, Officer Campbell ran Garrido's name. What she found stopped her cold. Phillip Garrido, registered sex offender. Prior conviction for kidnapping and rape. He had served time and been released. And here he was, on a university campus, with young women and children. The next morning when Garrido arrived at the police office, he brought Jaycee and the girls with him. Officers separated them, and for the first time in 18 years, Jaycee was in a room without Phillip Garrido present. Officers spoke to her quietly, gently. She was tense, guarded. She gave a false name. She insisted she was fine, but the officers kept talking to her. Patient, careful, persistent, and slowly, something inside Jaycee began to loosen. She told them her name, her real name, Jaycee Lee Dugard. It came out quietly, almost like she was not sure she was allowed to say it anymore. Officers cross-referenced the name immediately. A missing persons case, South Lake Tahoe, California. June 10, 1991, an 11-year-old girl with blonde hair who had been snatched from a street corner on a Tuesday morning. She was alive. She was here. She was 30 years old, and she had just walked into a police building and said her own name out loud for the first time in 18 years. The room went very still, and then everything happened at once. Garrido and Nancy were arrested within hours. Law enforcement descended on the Antioch property in force, and what they found in that backyard confirmed every fear anyone had brought to the case and broke the heart of every officer on the scene. The compound, the tents and sheds and makeshift rooms where 3 people had lived, hidden from the world. The conditions were described by investigators as deeply disturbing, but within the darkness, There were unmistakable signs of life and love. Books, drawings made by children, handmade games, journals filled with careful handwriting. A mother had lived in this space and had done everything within her power to make it human for her daughters. Officers who processed that scene spoke about it years later with visible emotion. Jaycee was reunited with her mother, Terry Prubin, shortly after the arrest. 18 years of waiting, 18 years of not knowing, 18 years of never being able to let yourself fully believe the worst, because to believe, it would have meant giving up hope entirely. That reunion is not something that can be fully described in words. A mother and daughter separated by a criminal's choice on an ordinary morning, finding each other again on the other side of something almost no one survives. Terry Prubin had never stopped looking, never stopped hoping. Every single day for 18 years, she had held on to the possibility that Jaycee was still out there somewhere. And she was right. Phillip Garrido pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 431 years in state prison. Nancy Garrido received a sentence of 36 years to life. They are both behind bars. They will remain there for the rest of their lives. For many people who followed this case closely, those sentences felt like the only appropriate response to what they had done. But sentences cannot give back what was taken. They cannot restore the childhood that was stolen, or the adolescence that was erased, or the 18 years of ordinary life that Jaycee Dugard never got to live. What Jaycee did after her rescue is extraordinary in a way that goes far beyond survival. She wrote a memoir called A Stolen Life, which became an immediate bestseller, and gave the world a rare and honest look at the psychology of captivity from the inside. She founded the JAC Foundation, which stands for Just Ask Yourself to Care, an organization dedicated to helping survivors of abduction and their families rebuild their lives and reintegrate into a world that has moved on without them. She gave interviews. She spoke publicly about the process of reclaiming an identity after someone has tried to erase it. She talked about the strange grief of returning to a world that had kept moving while she stood still. And she did all of this with a clarity, a dignity, and a grace that left everyone who encountered her account nearly speechless. The Garrido case forced the state of California to confront serious failures in how registered sex offenders are monitored after their release. Reforms were made, protocols were changed, new requirements were put in place for parole checks on high-risk offenders. But for Jaycee Dugard and her daughters, those changes came 18 years too late. So here's what I want to leave you with tonight. Jaycee Dugard did not survive because she was lucky. She survived because she chose, every single day, in whatever small ways she could, to hold on to herself. She survived because she became a mother, and let that love be more powerful than her fear. She survived because somewhere deep inside her, beneath every layer of control and conditioning and pain, the 11-year-old girl who walked to her bus stop on a Tuesday morning was still there, still waiting, still believing that someday, somehow, the world would find her. And it did. So I want to ask you something tonight, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer in the comments below. When someone survives something like this, something that took 18 years and 2 daughters, and a kind of endurance most of us cannot begin to imagine, what does justice actually mean? Is 431 years in prison justice? Is any sentence enough? And what does it say about us as a society? That the warning signs were there, that people drove past that backyard and filed reports and ran checks, and still this went on for nearly 2 decades? Leave your answer below, because this conversation matters. Jaycee Dugard matters, and every survivor who has ever had to rebuild their life from the inside out deserves to be seen, heard, and remembered.